Columbia was a center outside of the Davidson County area. People in 9 counties or so would come here to do grocery shopping, clothes, automobiles. That's why we had every conceivable automobile maker around here. So that identity is Columbia as a hub, and Columbia has a tremendous history, not only in itself, but the history of America. I mean, you know, we have a president that came from here, but we had multiple presidents that came through here on a regular basis, and that's no accident. My name is Joel Friedel, and I am co-owner of the West 7th Company with my wife, Kim. The West 7th Company, for the public side of things, is we have a gallery in the historic downtown, and we are archiving and curating what we call the Orman Collection, a collection of more than 1 million images that came from the Orman studio that was in town in operation for about 82 years. Mr. Burt was the last owner of the studio, and he was in really good health in his 80s, and he was trimming a tree, had an accident, and passed away. And his wife was fairly devastated by what she felt was the untimely death of Mr. Burt, and so she would not go to the studio for a while. And gradually she knew she had to do something, and so she got David White to help her sell off all the equipment. And David had White's camera in the building that we're sitting in. And I came by one day, he had the studio camera from the Orman studio. And I asked him about it, and he said he was selling it. And I just thought that was a tragedy to see something like that that had touched so many lives from 1945 to 2011, that I said, no, I'll write you a check. It'll stay here. There should be a museum one day. And he said, well, there's all these negatives. And we started talking, and said, crazy idea, and said, we'll build an online storage for this, and we'll pay for it, and we'll put a database together and make it to where people can see these photos, search for family members, and we'll do shows and have a gallery. And he said, yeah, and closed White's camera, retired, and we started redoing the building, and we've been working on that project for about 6 years, and the gallery's been open for 2.5. Mr. Orman, W.A. Orman, just was an interesting business person. He had to have a job to support a family, so he worked as a telegraph operator, but he was a photographer, I suppose, as a hobbyist. But he turned that into a business as well. So we have photographs that Mr. Orman took from the 30s. And so that would be the first Mule Day, the Mule Day before it was called Mule Day, the first Monday gatherings. But Mr. Orman also, his father started the Murray Democrat in 1882. And so we believe that we have photographs from that newspaper that Mr. Orman took care of. He also looked for previous photographers' works to preserve it. So he would take damaged negatives and make a new one. And so we have photos that go back to 1869. Because the studio was in business for 82 years, they took pictures of any big gathering, special events, historic things like LBJ coming down for the dedication of Columbia State. So anything that happened like that. But they also took day-to-day photos of people on the streets. And by doing that, they documented the changes downtown, businesses moving here and there, fires, that sort of stuff. And so there's this enormous historic collection of photos that tells the story of Columbia. You know, people ask us what's the favorite and all that stuff, and it's what's our latest, because it's like Christmas. We'll scan more. The courthouse construction is pretty awesome. To see people on the skeleton of the clock tower and people all the way up, including a man standing on the very top. that's fascinating, especially since that's such an iconic presence in the town. But there are other photos that I just have a natural relationship with, like an 1875 photo of the Silver Helicon van, because the guy that's in the middle of this photo is a photographer as well, and we've seen his photos from when he was a photographer right after the Civil War. I ended up in Columbia because I was lucky enough to meet my wife Kim in Nashville, and she lived in Columbia. Otherwise, Columbia just wasn't on my radar. I was happy in Nashville. So she got me to come down here, and we got married, and I just fell in love with the town. And I started reading. So for more than 10 years, I've been looking through newspapers and any book that I can find to learn about Columbia's history. So when this came along, it seemed like I had kind of prepped for this by doing all this research. And so this was something that I knew that this had almost come to the point of being lost. These negatives were going to be destroyed. The building was sold. It was torn down a couple of years ago. And these negatives were going to be melted down for silver. So knowing how close we came to losing the life work of not just one person, but multiple people, was something that I knew that had to be stopped. So that was just the impetus to save it. Once we got into it and we started to see the breadth and depth of the photography and the importance of the photography, it's saving art, it's preserving history, and it's reconnecting, especially the younger people that haven't seen a lot of the things that we lost, like the Columbia Female Institute. That was a tragic loss for the town. A castle that you could stand downtown and look to the west and see on the hill, and that was a college for women that was built in the 1830s. Most people weren't alive when that burned or don't remember that school. And everybody always talks about the Athenaeum, but the Female Institute was here far longer and had a huge impact on lots of lives. We're going to keep building the database and adding more photos, and we won't finish. So what we have to do is set an organization up to be able to make this continue into the future and keep the collection together. So all of the physical negatives are put into archival storage, but they won't survive. They're chemicals, they'll revert to chemicals. So the digital copies of these are the future, and we want it to be accessible to people as searchable database. Every bit of information that we are collecting, we're going to keep putting into it so that we build that part of it. We're adding Amazon recognition technology, so all the people we've identified will be able to go and search the entire database and find other instances of those people. Start planning, start dreaming, because the downtown, it is this great layout, but there are holes in this. And we need to start planning for the future and preserving and laying out the footprint of the city as it expands so that we can keep this downtown, because people come from all over the place, and I mean all over the world, come through here. And everybody loves the architecture and the feel of the downtown and the people. And it's been up and down. Just a few years ago, downtown, lots of plywood around here. Things are moving in the right direction. That doesn't mean it won't go into disrepair, and lots of downtowns disappear. Courthouses go away. You go to Lawrenceburg, you can see what used to be the courthouse. And those are the things that eviscerate a place and make it lose its identity and become a mall. So plan, look for the future, start dreaming.